Welcome back! My name is Ballerscuba. This is Video Games Over Time. We are still in 1982. Today, we're going to talk about the Commodore 64. The story of the Commodore 64 takes us back to Commodore. We have talked briefly about Commodore before. They were responsible for the Commodore PET and the VIC-II. Commodore was founded in 1958 by Jack Tramiel, a Polish-American businessman, mainly as a way to sell typewriters. Through the years, Commodore would also sell calculators, furniture, adding machines, and radio and stereo equipment. However, in 1975, Texas Instruments, who had previously produced calculator parts, began producing calculators themselves. Commodore's share in the calculator market shrank drastically as a result. In 1976, Commodore received an infusion of cash. That money was used to purchase several microchip manufacturers. The most famous one would be MOS Technology, which we have mentioned several times due to the MOS Technology 6502 microchip. As part of the deal, MOS Technology's chip designer, Chuck Peddle, became the head of engineering at Commodore. It was Chuck Peddle that convinced Jack Tramiel that calculators were not the future. Peddle convinced Tramiel that Commodore should move toward computers. Jack Peddle then took the lead on designing the Commodore PET, short for Personal Electronic Transactor, which would be released in 1977. From then on, Commodore became a computer company. By 1980, Commodore became one of the 3 largest computer companies in the world, and was the largest computer company in Europe. However, Commodore's success in the United States was not long-lasting. By 1981, their share in the computer market in America was down to less than 5%. In 1981, Commodore released the VIC-II, a lower-end computer designed for home use. The VIC-II would be successful and helped revitalize the company's place in the American home computer market. The VIC-II would be followed by the Commodore 64. In 1981, MOS Technology would begin work on graphic and audio chips for a next generation of home consoles. These chips, the MOS Technology VIC-II graphics chip and the MOS Technology SID, Sound Interface Device sound chip, would be completed by November 1981. This would lead to the creation of the Commodore Max machine, also known as the Ultimax. This computer, designed by Yosh Terakura of Commodore Japan, would be sold in Japan in early 1982. However, it did not sell well, possibly due to having only 2 kilobytes of RAM, and the computer was quietly discontinued, and all its international releases were cancelled. The engineers of the new chips, though, convinced Jack Tramiel that there should be a follow-up to the VIC-II, a lower-end computer for the home market. They also convinced Tramiel that the computer should have 64 kilobytes of RAM, despite the cost of RAM at the time. Tramiel agreed, and work happened quickly. The computer would be ready in time to show at the 1982 Computer Electronics Show in January. During development, the computer was codenamed the VIC-40, as a successor to the VIC-II. However, the name would be changed to the Commodore 64, named after the 64 kilobytes of RAM. The computer's chief designers would be Yosh Terakura, Shiraz Shivji, Bob Russell, Bob Yanis, and David Ziembicki. The Commodore 64 would come in the same case as the VIC-II, and it would also use the same size motherboard, and would use the same Commodore BASIC 2.0. However, on top of the upgrade in RAM, the Commodore 64 would use the upgraded MOS Technology 6510 microchip. When the Commodore 64 debuted at CES, it proved to be popular. Their competitors at Atari were most astonished at the low price of the computer. The Commodore 64 was advertised for just $595, just under $1,700 in 2021. This was only possible because Commodore owned MOS Technology, the developer of their microchips. Commodore would begin producing Commodore 64s in spring 1982, and would begin shipping the machine in August 1982. It quickly outsold its competitors, which were the Atari computers and the Apple II. The Commodore 64 was more powerful than its competitors and was cheaper. The computer was not without its flaws, though. It lacked a variety of software when it was released. It also suffered from faulty chips and a shortage of disk drives. However, these issues were short-lived, and by 1983 were largely resolved. Commodore aggressively advertised their new computer with a series of television commercials. They also released detailed technical information in order to help developers create software for their computer. The Commodore 64 had ports that could be used to plug in a video game controller, including an Atari joystick controller. For software, the Commodore 64 could read both cassettes and floppy disks, provided the right peripherals are used. Although the Commodore 64 did not have an immediate impact on video games in 1982, as it would take time for developers to create those games, the Commodore 64 would prove to be a powerful video game machine. We will be talking about the Commodore 64 quite often as we continue. With the Commodore 64 on the market, another solid platform for video games would become available for developers, and this platform was popular. Looking ahead, we will continue to hear about the Commodore 64, and we will see video games released for the system in the future. That means we will hear from Commodore and Jack Tramiel again in the future, as their work in computers would have an impact on video games. That will do it for the story of the Commodore 64 for now. My name is Ballerscuba. This has been Video Games Over Time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in our next video when we restore the crown.